Chicago, in late November, had its way of biting into the skin. The winds that swept along the riverfront carried the chill of the season and a heaviness that seemed to mirror Audrey Baker's heart. The glass towers along Michigan Avenue shimmered against the fading light, reflecting a city that never paused, softened, or offered much sympathy. And yet, within that unrelenting pace, one woman's world felt like it was collapsing under invisible weight. Audrey sat at her desk in the bustling headquarters of Thomas & Company Holdings, a multinational firm whose influence stretched far beyond the streets of Chicago. She was a secretary, efficient, diligent, invisible in all the ways a woman like her was expected to be. Her skin was deep brown, luminous beneath the office lights, and her posture was poised in quiet defiance of the chaos around her. But if her outer calm betrayed confidence, her inner turmoil was a storm. Across the office, Marcus Lee's voice rang out again. It was sharp mocking, designed to slice through her composure like a knife. "She still loves me, you know," Marcus drawled, his words laced with arrogance. "Always chasing after me, always pretending she doesn't care." The laughter that followed wasn't just his. A few colleagues chuckled under their breath, eager to align themselves with the office's self-proclaimed golden boy. With his designer suits and salesman's charm, Marcus had once been Audrey's boyfriend. That was months ago. Yet his presence, audacity, and refusal to let her go lingered like a stubborn scar she couldn't erase. Audrey's fingers froze on the keyboard. Her throat tightened, the muscles in her jaw clenching as she forced herself not to look up. She could feel the sting of humiliation pressing in, the weight of eyes watching her, measuring her silence, questioning why she didn't fight back. And then something inside her snapped. Enough. She pushed her chair back, the scrape of the legs against the floor, louder than the rhythm of her pounding heart. For too long, she had swallowed Marcus's insults, his smirks, his need to parade control in front of her. But the company's annual gala was tomorrow night, where every employee was expected to bring a date, a silent competition of power and appearances. She could already see it, Marcus walking in with some polished beauty on his arm, his smug grin directed solely at her, proof that he had won. Not this time. Audrey's hand trembled as she reached for her phone. She typed into the search bar with more determination than she had felt in weeks. Companion for corporate event, discreet. The list that appeared felt surreal. Dozens of profiles, smiling men offering polished charm. 2 perfect promises, scripted lines that made her skin crawl. But one profile stopped her cold. Owen Thomas. The photographs were so striking that they didn't seem real. No over-polished grin, no gimmicks, just a man in a dark suit with eyes that seemed to stare straight through the screen. His description was brief: companion for social events. Discreet. Adaptable. Fee $500. Audrey frowned. $500 was not small money, not for someone like her. Yet something about him pulled her in. He didn't look like someone who rented himself out for an evening. He looked like he belonged at the top of a boardroom table, commanding attention, commanding respect. Her thumb hovered for only a second before she hit send message. "I need a date for a corporate gala tomorrow night." Fee confirmed. "Can we discuss details today?" The reply came 2 minutes later, swift and precise. Confirmed. 7:00 p.m. You choose the place. A shiver ran through her body. For the first time that day, she felt something sharp, something alive control. The cafe on Chicago's Riverwalk was small, but elegant, with warm lighting and hushed intimacy that promised confidentiality. Audrey arrived at 6:58 p.m., her nerves strung tight, her heart performing a rhythm she couldn't tame. She ordered chamomile tea and sat near the window, the twinkle of holiday lights outside reflecting on the glass like stars. And then, at exactly 700 p.m., he entered. Owen Thomas. Tall, broad-shouldered. The dark gray suit was tailored with an exactness that whispered wealth, but it was worn with a quiet ease that suggested he was used to power. His hair was slicked back not ostentatiously, but with a precision that only someone who cared about presence would master. And those eyes, clear, steel blue, scanned the cafe until they landed on her. "Miss Baker," he asked, his voice low, smooth, steady. Audrey rose to her feet, though her legs wavered slightly beneath her. "Mr. Thomas?" He nodded. The handshake that followed was warm, yet commanding, his palm steady against hers, which spoke of someone who was never unsure of himself. "Let's get straight to the point," Audrey said, her tone sharper than she intended. She pulled out her phone notes, already prepared. "The gala is tomorrow. You will be my boyfriend for the evening." That's it. No improvisation, no surprises. "Understood. We'll say we've been together for 2 months. We met at a cafe. You're a consultant, you travel often. Please keep it simple and believable." He didn't argue, didn't add, didn't even smile. He observed, his eyes fixed on her like he was memorizing every detail. The stillness unsettled her more than arrogance ever could. "Have you done this before?" she pressed. "For $500. His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Not everything is about money." The words landed in her chest with unexpected weight. She blinked, unable to process why they lingered the way they did. She shook it off. "Fine. I'm Audrey Baker, marketing analyst at Thomas & Co. You and Mr. Thomas is a consultant. Just Owen for now." "You're very direct," he noted. "And you're very mysterious," she replied, arching a brow. Their silence wasn't awkward. It was charged thick with something neither of them dared name. For 40 minutes they crafted their script where they had met. The way he won her over. Why had she chosen him? All of it is tidy and believable enough to silence Marcus and the whispers of the office. Owen slipped a small card from his pocket when they rose to leave. "Say white wine 3 times if anything gets out of hand tomorrow." Audrey frowned. "That's a code. A reminder," he said calmly, "that you won't have to worry about a thing." She tucked the card into her purse. But as she stepped into the icy Chicago night, one thought wouldn't leave her. No man with that presence, that confidence, that look, would work for $500 a night. Owen Thomas was hiding something. Audrey barely slept that night. She tossed in bed, the echo of his words haunting her. Not everything is about money. What kind of man said that, while offering himself as a rental boyfriend? What type of companion carried himself with the quiet dominance of someone used to commanding entire rooms? By dawn, her nerves had sharpened into resolve. Marcus would not win tomorrow. Not this time. She would walk into that ballroom with Owen Thomas on her arm, and for once, Marcus would be the one silenced. She didn't know, then couldn't possibly know, that the decision she made in a moment of desperation would unravel her life thread by thread and weave it into something she had never dared imagine. Before we go further, tell me, if you were in Audrey's shoes, would you take the same risk? Would you pay $500 to silence a man who had humiliated you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your perspectives. And if you're drawn into this story, hit that like button and follow the channel, because this is only the beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when Audrey walks into that ballroom tomorrow night. Chicago woke to a gray sky that Saturday morning, the kind that threatened rain, but offered only the weight of heavy clouds pressing down on the skyline. Audrey Baker rose early, her body humming with restless energy. The gala wasn't until evening, but the anticipation was already coiled tight inside her like a spring. Every choice she made, her outfit, hairstyle, and even lipstick color felt suddenly monumental. Still beneath all the preparations, there was the gnawing echo of last night's meeting. Owen Thomas. Even now, when she closed her eyes, she could see him sitting across the cafe table, unyielding calm, as if the world bent quietly around his presence. He had agreed to her terms without protest, listened with an almost unsettling intensity, and then, with that strange cryptic phrase, white wine. The memory made her chest tighten. Who exactly had she hired? By mid-morning, she forced herself to focus on work. The office was quieter on weekends, but Audrey had always preferred it that way. The soft clack of her keyboard, the low hum of the building, the faint scent of paper and ink, it grounded her. It distracted her from the storm Marcus had brewed in her life for a while. But then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Good afternoon. Audrey, before tonight, may I confirm a few details over lunch? Her heart skipped. She didn't need to ask who it was. The message was precise, polite, yet commanding. Audrey. Yes. Same cafe as yesterday. 12:30. When she arrived 5 minutes early this time, Owen was already there. He sat at the same table near the window, a navy blue shirt rolled neatly at the cuffs, dark hair perfectly in place. In the daylight, he looked even sharper, his features drawn in angles that suggested discipline, but softened by the faintest half-smile as she approached. "You're punctual," she said. "Always." His tone was straightforward, factual, as though punctuality was not a courtesy, but a law he lived by. So she asked, settling into the chair across from him, "What details do you need?" Owen leaned forward slightly, folding his hands. "Your ex-boyfriend, Marcus. What should I know?" Audrey hesitated, then exhaled. Marcus Lee. Arrogant. Manipulative. He loves attention and thrives on making others feel small. He'll probably try to provoke you, or intimidate me. Noted. Owen replied evenly, as though she had described the weather. "And your co-workers?" "Most are fine. But Sandra from HR loves gossip. Paulo from finance too. They'll scrutinize you, look for cracks in our story. They live for drama." Owen's eyes narrowed slightly, like a chess player storing away every piece of information for later use. "And your company?" he asked Thomas and Comey. "Is it multinational?" She frowned. "Why does that matter? I'd rather not ask something ignorant about your work and expose us. If someone brings up business, I need to respond naturally." It made sense, though. Something in his tone unsettled her. He didn't sound like a man merely preparing to play a role. He sounded like someone who already belonged in the conversation. She explained slowly that Thomas and Comey is a holding company with multiple divisions, including marketing where I work. But you don't need corporate details. Just be polite. "Understood," he said, though the glimmer in his eyes suggested otherwise. She opened her phone, scrolling to her notes. Our love story. We met 2 months ago at a cafe near Millennium Park. I dropped my laptop. You helped me. We talked for hours. You asked me to go out for dinner, and we've been seeing each other since then. Believable. You're a freelance consultant. You travel often. That explains why my colleagues haven't seen you before." He tilted his head. "And how did I win you over?" She paused, realizing she hadn't planned that detail. "You remember small things. You're thoughtful. And you don't try to impress me with money." Something flickered across his expression. A spark of irony, perhaps. Interesting choice. "Why?" "Because it's true." His words came lightly, almost teasingly, yet depth was behind them. Audrey blinked, unsettled again. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," he said, leaning back. She shook her head, frustrated by the constant feeling that he was leading her into a maze. but there was no time to dwell. They rehearsed small details for the next half hour, from favorite wines to movie preferences. Owen remembered everything flawlessly. When she corrected him once, "No, you prefer classic films, not action," he repeated it without hesitation, locking it into memory, as if it had always been true. But it wasn't his memory that unnerved her. It was his knowledge. When she mentioned Thomas & Company's recent restructuring, he asked questions far too specific, as though he already knew the firm's inner workings. "Did you study business?" she asked suspiciously. "A little of everything," he replied vaguely. She pressed, and finally he sighed. "My full name is Owen Thomas. 32. I live in Chicago. Yes, I've worked in finance before. What kind of work investments? And now, he said, his gaze steady. I do this occasionally as a hobby." Audrey stared. "Is pretending to be someone's boyfriend your hobby?" "Corporate life," he murmured, "is far more boring." His answer didn't satisfy her. But she reminded herself she hadn't hired him for his autobiography. She had hired him to stand beside her tonight, silence Marcus and make her feel like she hadn't been broken. As they rose to leave, he touched her arm lightly, the gesture firm but gentle. "Remember, white wine, 3 times. Her pulse quickened at the weight behind those words. She nodded, though she didn't understand why the code felt less like a joke and more like a shield. The hours crawled by until evening. At 7:45 p.m., Audrey stood at the entrance of the Palmer house, Hilton nerves trembling through her in waves. She wore a navy dress, elegant, understated, meant to project confidence without excess. But as she caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls, she wondered if confidence could ever truly be worn like fabric. And then she saw him. Owen arrived exactly at 8:00, striding into the hotel lobby like he owned it. His black suit was flawless, the fabric bespoke, and his tie was the precise shade of gray that whispered sophistication. He didn't look like a rented companion. He looked like an executive walking into a merger meeting, a man accustomed to commanding not just attention, but silence. "Good evening," he said, offering his arm. "Good evening," Audrey managed, but her throat suddenly dried. As they walked toward the ballroom, Audrey felt the eyes of strangers turning toward them. Women glanced twice, some with admiration, some with envy. Men shifted subtly, recalibrating their sense of hierarchy. She breathed deeply, reminding herself of the script. Yet Owen's voice slipped against her ear, low and certain. "You're nervous." "A little," she admitted. "Breathe. You'll be fine." Something about the timbre of his voice steadied her pulse. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers, tables adorned with white linens, and crystal glasses reflecting soft light. Around 80 employees mingled glasses of wine in hand laughter, weaving through the air. And then she saw him. Marcus. She was recognized from her birthday dinner months ago in a navy suit at the bar. His laughter was too loud, his gestures too wide, his smile too smug, until his eyes landed on her. And then the smile faltered. "He saw you," Owen murmured. "I know. Shall we go to him?" "Not yet. Let him wonder." Owen's lips curved faintly. "I like your strategy." They moved toward Sandra, from HR, the office's infamous gossip. Sandra's eyes lit up at the sight of Audrey, then widened as they fell on Owen. "Audrey, you look stunning. And who is this prince?" "This is Owen, my boyfriend." Owen extended his hand with effortless grace. "Pleasure to meet you, Sandra. Audrey speaks very highly of you." Sandra nearly melted. Questions flowed: how long they'd been together, where they'd met, and every answer rolled off Owen's tongue, as though it were his memory. Audrey could barely keep up with how flawlessly he played his role. For the next half hour, they drifted through the room greeting colleagues, enduring scrutiny. And to Audrey's astonishment, Owen adapted seamlessly. When Paolo from finance tested him with an investment talk, Owen efficiently responded, weaving knowledge of markets and strategies like a seasoned professional. Paolo's eyebrows lifted, impressed, and Audrey's suspicion deepened. This man was no hobbyist. It was nearly an hour before Marcus finally approached. "Audrey," he said, his smile forced. "What a surprise." "Marcus," she replied evenly. "This is Owen, my boyfriend." The handshake that followed was tight, competitive, and the air around them was charged. "So, what do you do?" Owen Marcus asked. "Business consulting," Owen replied calmly. "And you sales." "Top performer here," Marcus boasted. "Congratulations," Owen said smoothly, unfazed. The exchange was simple, polite on the surface, but Audrey could feel the tension thrumming beneath. Marcus tried to pull her aside, but Owen's presence anchored her. When she refused, Marcus's frustration boiled over. "I just wanted to say," Marcus muttered finally, "I hope you're happy." "Thank you," Audrey replied flatly. He left, but not without glancing back, his eyes sharp, his pride wounded. Audrey exhaled slowly. She hadn't expected Owen to steady her so much, or his calm to become a shield. And yet, she also hadn't expected the way he seemed to belong here, as though this wasn't a charade at all, but the unveiling of his proper place in the world. And for the first time, a dangerous thought crept into her mind. Who exactly had she brought into her life? The music in the ballroom shifted from lively jazz to something slower, smoother strings that draped across the air like velvet. Audrey Baker stood close to Owen Thomas, the warmth of his arms steady against her back, as though he had been placed in her life for this moment alone. For the first time all evening, she allowed herself to breathe. The gala was unfolding exactly as she had hoped, perhaps even better. Sandra from HR was already whispering animatedly to a group near the entrance, no doubt spreading the tale of Audrey's impossibly polished new boyfriend. Paolo from finance looked visibly impressed after his exchange with Owen, and even colleagues who often overlooked her were now treating her with an air of respect, as though Owen's presence elevated her in their eyes. And Marcus was seething. She could feel his glare across the ballroom, a weight pressing into her spine whenever she turned away. "Relax," Owen murmured near her ear, his voice calm, unhurried. "You've already won." Audrey glanced up at him, caught by the ease in his eyes, the assurance in his tone. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know men like him," Owen replied. "They fight to control the room and unravel when someone else commands attention." His gaze flicked briefly toward Marcus, who stood stiffly at the bar, jaw-tight, glass clutched too firmly in hand. The sight almost made Audrey smile. Almost. But as she returned her focus to Owen, her smile faltered. She hadn't planned for this, for the way his calm steadiness disarmed her, and his words seemed to reach a place she had hidden for too long. Tonight was supposed to be about dignity, pride, and proving to Marcus that she wasn't broken. It wasn't supposed to be about feeling. They moved gracefully through conversations, Owen's presence never faltering. He was polite, warm without overstepping, curious without intruding. He laughed softly and genuinely, drawing people closer rather than pushing them away. Audrey watched in awe as he remembered names effortlessly, as if each colleague mattered to him, as if he had been preparing for this evening far longer than a single day. The more he spoke, the more unsettled Audrey became. He wasn't just pretending. He belonged here. At one point, Paolo leaned in with a glass of wine. "Owen, we always look for consultants at Thomas & Company. You grasp markets. You'd fit right in with our team." Owen smiled politely. "That's kind of you, but I prefer to keep my independence." Shame, Paulo said with a laugh. We could use someone with your level of insight. Audrey's chest tightened. She had heard Paulo test countless people with his finance talk, often to expose holes in their knowledge. Yet Owen hadn't faltered once. His knowledge wasn't borrowed or rehearsed. It was lived. And that frightened her. As the evening wore on, Marcus finally approached again, this time with forced cordiality. He extended a hand to Owen, who accepted it calmly. Their grips firm. The air between them charged. Marcus Lee, he said. Elena's ex-boyfriend. Owen Thomas came the steady reply. Current boyfriend. The flicker of irritation in Marcus's eyes was brief but telling. So Owen, Marcus said, feigning casualness. What is it you do? Business consulting. Sales? Marcus countered, puffing his chest slightly. I'm one of the top performers here. Congratulations, Owen replied without the faintest hint of irony. Audrey had to suppress a laugh. Marcus thrived on competition, on the tug-of-war of egos. Yet Owen gave him nothing to push against or measure himself against. It was as though Marcus's bravado slid off him like rain against glass. Marcus turned to Audrey. Can I speak to you in private? She felt Owen tense beside her, his arm protective without being possessive. Anything you have to say, she answered coolly. You can tell in front of my boyfriend. Marcus's smile strained, his mask cracking. Audrey, please, just a minute. No. The word hung in the air, firm and unyielding. A small circle of nearby colleagues had already begun watching, curiosity sparking in their eyes. Marcus's jaw tightened, his composure slipping. I just wanted to say, I hope you're happy, he muttered, finally retreating with wounded pride. Thank you, Audrey said flatly. The crowd shifted back to their conversations, but Marcus's eyes remained fixed on them from a distance, simmering with quiet rage. Later, as Audrey and Owen drifted toward the dance floor, she exhaled in relief. She hadn't realized how much weight she'd carried until that moment, the weight of Marcus' judgment and humiliation. Owen had lifted it effortlessly, his presence a fortress around her. You handled Paulo well, she whispered, as Owen spun her gently to the music. Experience, he said. What kind of experience? His smile was enigmatic. Let's enjoy the evening. Audrey arched a brow, but a voice cut through the music before she could press further. Thomas, someone said. They both turned. Standing before them was Richard Mendez, the company's chief operating officer. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his frame tall and commanding. He was a man Audrey respected deeply, a man who rarely let anything slip past his sharp eyes. Owen Thomas. Right. Richard asked, his tone too casual to be casual at all. Owen nodded, calm as ever. That's right. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Do you have any relatives with Thomas? Capital Audrey froze. She glanced sharply at Owen, whose expression remained unreadable. Thomas is a common name, he replied smoothly. Perhaps, Richard said with a chuckle. But not with your profile. Audrey's pulse quickened. What profile? She asked. Nothing. Richard said at last, though his eyes lingered on Owen with unmistakable suspicion. Just thought the name sounded familiar. He excused himself politely, but Audrey noticed how Richard kept glancing back throughout the evening, as though trying to place a memory he couldn't quite reach. Audrey and Owen slipped into the crisp night air when the gala finally wound down. The Chicago streets glittered with lights, the sound of distant traffic weaving through the hum of the city. You were perfect, she said quietly, still dazed by how flawlessly he had played his part. It was my pleasure. She hesitated at the cab stand, her hand on the door. Owen, Thomas Capital. Do you know that company? His smile faltered for the first time all evening, just slightly, just enough for her to notice. "Good night, Audrey," he said gently. The cab door closed between them. But as it pulled away, Audrey glanced back through the window. He was still standing there on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on her as though the night wasn't over, as though he were holding on to something unspoken. At that moment, she knew that Owen Thomas was not who he claimed to be. The next morning, Audrey woke with his image still burned into her mind. The quiet confidence, the strange familiarity in Richard's question, the way Owen's expression shifted at the mention of Thomas Capital. She brewed a pot of coffee and opened her laptop, curiosity gnawing at her resolve. Thomas Capital. Her search pulled up articles instantly, an investment company founded in Chicago 5 years ago, assets surpassing $2 billion, known for discretion and bold strategies. Yet its website listed no executives, no photographs, nothing personal. Just a single line at the bottom of the About Us page, founded by O. Thomas in 2019. Audrey's breath caught. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the look in Richard's eyes last night told her otherwise. Could the man she had paid $500 to play her boyfriend be the founder of a billion-dollar investment firm? The thought sent a chill down her spine, and as she sat staring at her laptop screen, heart racing, one truth settled heavily within her. Hiring. Owen Thomas might not have been the end of her troubles. It might have been the very beginning. The following evening, Chicago's sky was the color of steel-heavy clouds rolling across the horizon, as though they too carried secrets. Audrey Baker stood outside her apartment window, her fingers curled tightly around the thin curtain as she stared down at the streets below. Cabs slid past in streaks of yellow, and pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas, each lost in their battles. She, however, could not shake the war inside her. The laptop still sat open on her coffee table, its screen glowing with the words she had uncovered. Founded by O. Thomas in 2019. Owen Thomas. It had to be him. Too precise to be a coincidence, too exact to dismiss. But how? Why would a billionaire founder of Thomas Capital, a man with the wealth and power she couldn't fathom, rent himself out as a date for $500? Her phone buzzed. The sound jolted her nerves, rushing to the surface. Unknown number. Dinner. 8:00 p.m. 1440 North Lakeshore Drive. Don't be late. Her chest tightened. She read the message 3 times before the weight of the address struck her. North Lakeshore Drive, home to Chicago's most expensive condominiums, each overlooking the vast sweep of Lake Michigan. She had only admired places from a distance, never imagining she would step inside. Her instinct screamed caution, and yet her heart, unsteady, rebellious, told her she couldn't walk away. At 7:58 p.m., Audrey stood in the marble lobby of the tower, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The doorman, a tall man in a navy uniform, greeted her by name without her offering it. "Good evening, Miss Baker. Mr. Thomas is expecting you on the 35th floor." Her pulse raced as the elevator doors closed around her, the ascent so smooth, it felt like floating. When the doors slid open, her palms were damp against her clutch. She stepped into a world she hadn't been prepared for. Owen's apartment was vast, its floor-to-ceiling windows opening onto the endless black shimmer of Lake Michigan. The room was a palette of muted grays and soft creams, every line sleek, every surface gleaming. But what struck her most wasn't the wealth, but the silence. The space was alive with grandeur, yet it felt hollow, like a museum stripped of warmth. Owen stood by the windows, his silhouette carved against the city lights. A glass of amber liquid glowed in his hand, the ice clinking softly as he turned to face her. "You came." His voice was calm, but his eyes carried something more profound, something taut, as though he had been waiting for her arrival in judgment. "You didn't give me much of a choice." Audrey said carefully, stepping inside. You sent an address, not an invitation. He regarded her with quiet intensity. Would you have come? The question unsettled her more than the command had. She exhaled slowly, moving further into the apartment. Why don't you tell me who you are? Owen? His lips quirked at one corner, a smile that wasn't quite a smile. You already know. Thomas Capital. She pressed her voice firm. You're the founder, aren't you? Silence stretched between them, thick and weighted. Finally, he set his glass down on a low table and moved closer. Each step, deliberate, measured. Yes. The word was simple, yet it cracked something open inside her. Relief. Confusion, awe tangled within her chest, leaving her unsteady. Why? Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would a man like you rent myself out for $500? He finished smoothly, though his tone held no mockery. Because sometimes, Miss Baker, it's easier to be a stranger than to be who the world demands you to be. Her brows knit together. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. Not yet. He gestured toward the dining table where candles flickered against crystal glasses. Sit. Eat with me. Then I'll tell you what I can. Dinner was an exquisite arrangement of roasted lamb, wild rice, and winter vegetables, though Audrey barely tasted any of it. Her senses were attuned to Owen alone, the way he held his fork with unthinking precision. His gaze met hers, without wavering, the way silence seemed to rest comfortably around him. You don't live like a man trying to disappear, she said finally, breaking the tension. No, he admitted. I live like a man who can afford silence. That's different. And yet, you rent yourself out. Only when I choose. She set her fork down, frustration prickling her chest. You keep speaking in riddles. If you want me to trust you, you must be honest. Owen leaned back, studying her. The candlelight cast his face in sharp relief, accentuating the lines of his jaw, the steel in his eyes. Honesty is dangerous, he said softly. But here's a truth you can hold on to. Last night, you weren't just proving something to Marcus at that gala. You were proving something to yourself. And you did it beautifully. The words pierced deeper than she expected. Audrey swallowed hard, her throat tight. You watched me like you've known me for years. Why? Because, he said, his voice low. I recognize strength when I see it, and I realize loneliness even more. Her chest constricted. She hadn't realized until now how exposed she felt in his presence, seen in a way no one had ever dared to see her. After dinner, Owen led her to the balcony. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of the lake and the hum of the city far below. Audrey wrapped her arms around herself, but Owen slipped his jacket from his shoulders and draped it over her without a word. You didn't need to do that, she murmured. He replied simply, that I don't do things I don't want. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the lights of Chicago stretching endlessly beneath them. Audrey found herself stealing glances at him, the ease in his stance, the weight in his expression, the strange vulnerability that seemed to flicker only when he thought she wasn't watching. She said quietly, that you're nothing like the man I expected to meet. And you, Owen murmured, his gaze lingering on her face, are everything I didn't expect to find. The words sent a tremor through her. She looked away quickly, the city blurring in her vision. This was dangerous. Whatever tether was forming between them wasn't part of her plan. I should go, she whispered. But when she turned, his hand caught hers firm, steady, not possessive, but grounding. She froze her breath, catching as their eyes locked. Audrey, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Be careful. When you start looking for who I am, you may not like what you find. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Are you threatening me? No, he said, his thumb brushing lightly against her skin. I'm warning you. When she finally stepped back into the elevator, her heart raced in her chest. The jacket he had draped over her shoulders still carried his warmth, scent, and presence. She pressed a hand against it, torn between the comfort it gave and the fear it ignited. He was right. She had already begun to look for him and peel back the layers of mystery. But what unsettled her most wasn't the secrets Owen Thomas carried. It was the truth she carried herself somewhere between desperation and discovery. She had started to care. The rain began in the late afternoon, a delicate veil slipping across Chicago's glass towers, until the skyline looked like it had been painted in watercolor. Audrey Baker sat in the back of a car Owen had ordered, the soft leather seat cradling her, while the city streamed by in blurred strokes. Her bag rested against her knees, though she hadn't unclenched her fingers from its strap since leaving the office. Her mind replayed every detail, Richard's face blanching. Sandra's pen stilled Marcus's humiliation like a sour taste in the air. And Owen, unflinching, measured, rearranging the entire room with nothing but facts and quiet authority. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't needed to. The truth in his presence had been enough. Now silence pressed between them in the car. Owen sat opposite, his posture relaxed, one hand resting against his knee. He watched the rain on the window as though it were a language only he could read. Audrey stole a glance, trying to measure him in the hush. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally, her voice subdued. His eyes shifted to hers. "Yes," he said, "I did." She searched his face, but there was no bravado, no indulgence in the power he had wielded, just certainty. "I could have handled it. You shouldn't have had to." The firmness in his tone disarmed her more than the words. She looked away, tracing the wet shimmer of headlights outside. "Where are we going?" she asked, realizing she hadn't questioned it until now. "Somewhere quieter," Owen replied. "You need distance, and I need to explain." The car stopped at the edge of Lincoln Park, where the rain fell heavily against the lakefront. They entered through a private entrance between two stone pillars, and Audrey realized it wasn't a restaurant or a hotel. It was a townhouse, tall and austere, its windows glowing faintly against the storm. Inside, warmth wrapped around her. The foyer smelled faintly of cedar, the kind of scent that clings to well-kept libraries. Hardwood floors stretched toward a staircase, and the light was soft golden without ostentation. "Is this yours?" she asked. "One of them," Owen admitted, slipping his jacket onto a stand. "This is where I come when I don't want to be found." She glanced at him. "And yet, you brought me." His eyes lingered on hers, quiet but unreadable. "Yes." He led her to a room lined with shelves. Books stood in disciplined rows, interrupted by a few pieces of art. Abstract canvases of gray and blue, a sculpture of hands reaching but not touching. Audrey strolled, fingers brushing the spines. "You read all of these?" she asked. "Not all. Enough." He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "This house isn't for display. It's for remembering. Remembering what I'm still a person, not just a balance sheet with a pulse." She looked at him over the rim of her glass. "Is that what people see when they look at you? Mostly?" His mouth curved, but not into a smile. "Sometimes they see less." Something in his words pressed against her chest, an ache she hadn't expected. She thought of Marcus and Richard and how easily they had tried to diminish her today. She understood. She set the glass down, her hands unsteady. "Owen, what exactly are you warning me about?" "At the office, you said that if I kept looking for who you are, I might not like what I find." He exhaled, leaning back against the shelf. The lamplight traced the sharp angles of his jaw and softened the weariness in his eyes. Because my world doesn't forgive softness, he said. Because people mistake affection for liability. And if you stand too close to me, you inherit enemies you never asked for. She felt her heartbeat climb. So today, Marcus Richard, that wasn't unusual for you? No. He lifted the glass but didn't drink. It was routine, just with higher stakes because it touched you. Her breath caught. You risked your reputation for me. I don't measure risk the way other people do. His voice was quiet, but it sank deep, and Audrey felt the truth of it stirring places in her heart she hadn't let anyone reach. They ate later in a smaller room with tall windows, where the rain carved silver lines against the dark. Dinner was simple grilled fish, roasted vegetables, bread still warm. Owen served without flourish, without the veneer of staff that might have turned it into a ceremony. I didn't think billionaires cooked. Audrey teased softly, her fork cutting into the fish. I didn't cook it, he admitted. But I know how. I learned because my mother hated the kitchen, and someone had to. She paused, watching him. You don't talk about your family. There isn't much to say. That's not true. You don't want to say it. The words slipped out before she could measure them, but Owen didn't bristle. He set his fork down, his gaze steady on hers. My father built the first pieces of Thomas Capital, he said finally, aggressively, ruthlessly. He believed the only way to survive in America was to conquer it. My mother, she didn't survive him. The admission landed between them, fragile and heavy. Audrey's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Owen's lips pressed into a thin line. Don't be. It made me what I am. It taught me that affection is a currency you spend only when you can afford to lose. She shook her head slowly. But you gave it today. You spent it on me. For the first time, his composure shifted, a flicker of something raw in his eyes. He looked away, his fingers tightening against his glass. Maybe, he said. After dinner, they lingered in the study again. Audrey wandered to the windows, her reflection faint against the storm outside. She felt him behind her, the warmth of his presence distinct even at a distance. You changed everything today, she whispered. No, he said, close enough now that his voice brushed her like a touch. I just showed them you can't be broken. She turned, and he was nearer than breath for the first time. His eyes, gray as smoke, steady as stone, held hers without defense. She felt her heart leap, her entire body suspended on the edge of something unspoken. Owen. Her voice trembled not from fear, but from the enormity of what pressed between them. His hand lifted not to touch her, but to hover just near her cheek, as though asking permission without words. She leaned almost imperceptibly into the space between them, her breath catching. And then, he pulled back, the line of his jaw tightening. Not yet, he murmured, as if answering a question she hadn't voiced. Confusion, disappointment, relief, they tangled inside her. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. Why? Because once we cross that line, there's no going back. And I won't let this become another way the world uses you against yourself. Her throat ached with unshed words, but she understood. When the storm finally broke near midnight, Owen drove her home himself. The streets were slick reflections bending in the lamplight. They spoke little, the silence heavy but not unbearable. At her building, he parked without killing the engine. The rain had slowed to a mist, wrapping the city in silver haze. Will I see you again? She asked, surprising herself with the nakedness of the question. Owen looked at her. His eyes did not guard themselves this time. You will. Whether that's wise, I can't say. She nodded, hand on the door handle, reluctant to open it. Something inside her whispered that once she stepped out, the night would collapse into memory, fragile and untouchable. He said, "Good night, Audrey." Her name gentle on his lips. "Good night, Owen." She stepped into the mist, his car pulling away. Only once she was safely inside the lobby. But as she rode the elevator up, her pulse still unsteady, she realized she had already stepped across a line of her own, because she was already tethered, no matter his warnings or the storm in his world. And tethers once tied rarely came undone. The city glittered that Friday evening, its towers lit like constellations against a velvet sky. Yet beneath the hum of Chicago nightlife, Audrey Baker carried a heaviness that no glow could soften. She had barely slept since that night at Owen's townhouse, since the quiet confessions, the restraint, the warning that had lodged itself in her chest like a splinter. At work, the whispers hadn't stopped. Colleagues stole glances when she walked past their conversations, dipping into silence before resuming with a tone too brittle to be natural. Marcus had disappeared from the office for 2 days, but his absence was no comfort. If anything, it was worse. A pause before the storm. Audrey sat at her desk, late, the office floor half dark, only the vending machines hum, and the muted screens flicker around her. She pushed aside the latest report, unable to focus. Every line of numbers blurred into the memory of Owen's hand, hovering near her cheek, the warmth of a promise he refused to let solidify. The elevator dinged. She stiffened, glancing up. Marcus. He strolled across the floor with a smoothness that belied the sharpness in his eyes. His tie was loosened, his suit jacket slung over his arm, but his thin, deliberate smile was as sharp as broken glass. "Working late, Audrey." His tone carried the mockery of intimacy. She steadied her voice. "Some of us still have work to do." He chuckled softly, leaning against the divider near her desk. "You embarrassed me. In front of Owen Thomas, no less. Do you have any idea what kind of man he is?" Her chest tightened, but she refused to flinch. "Do you?" Marcus's eyes darkened. "Don't play clever. Men like Owen don't rescue women like you without a reason. Whatever game you think you're playing, you'll lose." She rose, gathering her papers with deliberate calm. "Then you should worry less about my game and more about your own." For a heartbeat, anger flared in his expression, but then he smiled again too easily. "Careful, Audrey. You don't know the world you've stepped into." By the time she left the building, her nerves were stretched taut. She wrapped her coat tighter as she walked toward the train, the wind sharp off the lake. Streetlights glowed against the pavement, but each shadow felt too thick, each corner too watchful. She had never been paranoid, but now. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You can't hide behind him forever." Her blood ran cold. She stopped beneath the harsh glow of a street lamp, scanning the faces of strangers. No one looked at her. No one slowed. Yet the words burned against the screen, undeniable. She dialed the only number her instincts trusted. Owen answered on the second ring, his voice low, steady. "Audrey, I think someone's following me," she said, her throat tight. She read him the message. Silence on the other end. No hesitation calculation. "Where are you, Staten Lake?" "Near the train." "Stay there. Don't move." He arrived within minutes, his black car pulling to the curb like an extension of the shadows. The door swung open, and Audrey slid inside, relief flooding her limbs only when she saw him. Owen in his dark coat, his expression unreadable but resolute. He didn't ask if she was imagining it. He didn't doubt her. Instead, he held her gaze as the driver pulled away. "Did you see anyone?" he asked. "No, just the message." "Please show me." She handed him the phone, her fingers brushing his. He scanned the screen, his jaw tightening. "This isn't random," he said. "This is calculated. Someone wants to rattle you." "Marcus." Her voice was almost inevitable. Perhaps, Owen murmured. But Marcus doesn't send anonymous threats. He prefers humiliation with witnesses. Then, who his silence was, answer enough. The answer lay not in who, but in him. In Owen's world. They drove not to his townhouse, but to another place, a penthouse near the Gold Coast, where the lake stretched out like a dark mirror beneath the stars. Audrey followed him inside, her pulse still restless, her nerves tight. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? Why am I caught in this?" Owen poured a glass of water and handed it to her. His hand lingered a fraction too long on hers, a subtle tether. "Because you stood beside me," he said. "Because the moment I defended you, you became visible. And visibility is dangerous." She looked up at him, frustration breaking through her fear. "Then why defend me at all? If this is the cost, because I don't regret it." He cut in, his voice sharp, stripped of restraint. The words silenced her. His gaze held hers fierce and unflinching, and for a moment she felt the full weight of what he wasn't saying. "Owen." Her voice softened. "You can't carry this alone. You warned me not to look too closely, but I'm already here. You can't keep me in the dark forever." He turned away. His hand braced against the window pane, the city's glow casting his reflection in fractured light. "He said things about me, his voice low stuff about my family and business that I don't forget. You don't step back if you know them, you fall in. And falling means you don't climb out." Her chest tightened. "Then, let me choose if I fall." He closed his eyes briefly, as though her words were both a wound and a balm. When he turned back, the conflict in his gaze was raw, unmasked. "You shouldn't want this," he whispered. "But I do." The silence that followed was electric trembling between danger and desire. He crossed the space between them slower this time, deliberate. His hand lifted, not hovering now, but brushing her cheek with the gentlest trace of his thumb. "You terrify me, Audrey Baker," he murmured. "Why?" Her breath shivered. "Because you make me remember that I'm human, and humanity is the one weakness I can't afford." Her heart thudded, the words unraveling her. She leaned closer, not to erase the fear, but to acknowledge and claim it. Yet just as his lips hovered near hers, a sharp buzz from his phone fractured the moment. He stepped back, tension snapping through his posture. One glance at the screen, and his expression hardened. "What is it?" she asked. "Marcus," he said, his voice like stone. "He's already moving." The next day at the office, the whispers had sharpened into words. Rumors about Audrey Owen favors and scandals snaked through the corridors. A leaked photo circulated in hushed circles, a blurry image of Owen's car parked outside Audrey's building. Sandra avoided Audrey's eyes. Richard smirked openly. Marcus, however, sat in the conference room as though he had won already, his smile a blade disguised as charm. Audrey's cheeks burned, but her spine stayed straight. She would not fold, not here, not now. That evening, when she returned to her desk, a note waited. No name. Just 4 words scrawled in sharp ink. "Everyone has a price." She carried it to Owen's penthouse, her hands shaking as she handed it to him. He read it, his expression unreadable before folding it in half. "This is an escalation," he said. "Marcus wants to corner me. He thinks you're leverage." Her throat constricted. "And what happens when he realizes I'm not leverage, just disposable?" His gaze snapped to hers, fierce, unyielding. "No one touches you. Not while I breathe." The intensity in his voice left her unsteady, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. He wasn't offering protection as charity. He was vowing it as truth. "Owen," her voice broke softly, "this us is already more than either of us intended. He closed the distance between them, his hand cradling the side of her face, firm yet tender. "Then let it be more," he whispered. That night, sleep was impossible. Audrey lay in the guest room of his penthouse, staring at the ceiling, while the city hummed below. Fear gnawed at her, but so did something else. Something dangerous, intoxicating the realization that she no longer wanted distance. Somewhere down the hall, Owen kept his vigil. She wondered if he too lay awake, torn between restraint and surrender. But one thing was sure: the shadows pressing at the edges of their world were growing darker, and shadows once unleashed demanded a reckoning. The following Monday dawned sharp and cold, the morning that polished Chicago's skyline to a mirror's edge. Audrey Baker moved through the office lobby with a deliberate calm, though her insides swirled with unease. Every pair of eyes seemed sharper now, every whisper pitched just low enough to sting. Her heels clicked against the marble steady-controlled. She would not give them what they wanted. No crack in her composure, no stumble to save her. But beneath the shell of poise, her pulse trembled. The photograph of Owen's car, the notes, the message shadows circling closer. In the conference room, Marcus already sat at the head of the table, a predator lounging in plain sight. He rose when she entered, smiling with the polish of a man rehearsing charm. "Ah, Audrey," he said smoothly just in time. Others filtered in, Sandra Richards, several board members. The air thickened with expectation. Audrey took her seat spine straight. What's this about? Marcus's smile widened. Transparency. He lifted a tablet, and the screen behind him flickered alive. Images filled the projection: Owen Thomas outside her building, Owen's car in shadow, Owen and Audrey walking side by side on a rainy night. Blurry, distant shots, but damning in implication. Gasps echoed. Sandra pressed a hand to her mouth. Richard's smirk bloomed into cruelty. Audrey's heart stopped. "This," Marcus declared, his voice silken with poison, "is what compromises our integrity. A junior employee entangled with the very man negotiating contracts worth billions. An apparent conflict of interest. How can our clients trust us if—" The doors opened. The room stilled. Owen Thomas stepped inside. He wore gray today, tailored and crisp, his presence slicing through the tension like a blade. The murmurs hushed, as though the air itself bent to him. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked only at Audrey. Her breath caught. Relief and fear tangled inside her. "Mr. Thomas," Marcus said, recovering his voice. "How fortunate you are to join us. I was outlining the nature of your extracurricular dealings." Finally, Owen's gaze shifted calm and deliberate toward Marcus. "Extracurricular." His tone was ice. "You speak as though you understand my calendar." A nervous laugh rippled. Marcus's smile wavered, but he pressed on. "We have evidence. The images speak for themselves. Your relationship with Ms. Baker compromises my relationship with Ms. Baker." Owen interrupted, voice cutting clean, "Is not your concern, nor is it the concern of this board." Shock flared across faces. Audrey froze. Relationship. The word hung heavy, irrevocable. Marcus pounced. "So you admit it, you confirm—" "I confirm nothing." "You have the right to demand," Owen said. His eyes never blinked, never softened. "But let me be clear, Thomas. Capital does not negotiate with blackmail." Gasps again. Marcus paled. Owen continued, calm but lethal. "You orchestrated surveillance of a colleague. You weaponized rumor and innuendo. That is not transparency. That is sabotage. And it ends now." The silence that followed was absolute. Sandra shifted uncomfortably. Richard looked down. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus's smile collapsed, rage bleeding through. "You think you can walk in here, and yes," Owen said. The meeting dissolved in fragments like glass, cracking under too much weight. Marcus stormed out, his footsteps sharp against the floor. Sandra avoided Audrey's gaze entirely. Richard slipped away without a word. Audrey sat motionless, her pulse wild. She hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, but the word relationship echoed in her ears like a bell. When the room finally emptied, only Owen remained. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city as though nothing had changed. "You didn't have to come," Audrey whispered. "Yes," he said, turning to her. "I did." She rose slowly. "You said relationship." His eyes held hers, steady, unflinching. "I don't retract it." Her breath caught. "Owen." But the words faltered. Her body hummed with a storm of fear, relief, and longing. She wanted to demand what he meant and intended, but part of her already knew. They left together. The lobby buzzed with cameras. Marcus's final weapon. Paparazzi planted by hands eager to wound swarmed the doors. Flashes split the air. Voices barked questions. "Mr. Thomas, is she your mistress? Ms. Baker, did you sleep your way into conflict of interest? Fraud, favoritism." Audrey froze under the blinding lights, shame clawing at her. She had never been a headline, never wanted to be. But now her name was shouted like a scandal, her face captured without consent. Then, Owen's hand found hers. Firm, unwavering. He led her through the crush, shielding her body with his own, absorbing the chaos without a flinch. His jaw was set, his eyes cold steel. At that moment, Audrey realized he wasn't hiding her. He was claiming her, claiming. Inside the sanctuary of his car, the world muffled at last. Audrey's chest heaved. She pulled her hand from his, pressing it to her temple. "This is too much," she whispered. "I can't live like this, every eye, every whisper." Owen turned toward her, his gaze softer now, stripped of armor. "You shouldn't have to. And yet, I pulled you into it." "No," she said quickly, fiercely. "Marcus did this. Not you." But even as she spoke, her voice broke. "Still, I don't know if I can bear it." Owen's hand hovered, then settled gently over hers. "Then let me bear it with you." Her eyes filled, tears trembling against her lashes. His words weren't polished or strategic, they were raw, unguarded. She saw not the billionaire titan or man for the first time. That evening in the quiet of his penthouse, the storm outside finally broke, rain thrashing against the windows, thunder rolling across the lake. Audrey stood near the glass, her reflection blurred by water streaks. "Do you regret saying it?" she asked softly. Relationship. Behind her, Owen's voice was low. "Do you want me to regret it?" She turned, meeting his gaze. "I want you to mean it." The space between them tightened. He crossed it slowly, deliberately, as though each step was a vow. He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest when he reached her. His heartbeat thudded steadily against her palm. "I mean it," he said. Her breath trembled. She searched his face, the planes of his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes, the truth in his stare. And then, without permission, her body answered what her mind feared. She rose on her toes, her lips brushing his. The kiss was not gentle. It was fierce, desperate, as though both had been starved of air and found breath only in each other. His hand cradled her jaw, his other arm encircling her waist, pulling her close. She melted, surrendering, clinging as the storm outside raged in harmony with the storm within. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his, both breathless. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Yes," he murmured. "It does." Later, when the storm softened to a whisper, they lay side by side on the couch, her head resting against his shoulder. He stroked her hand absently as though anchoring himself to her presence. "You should know," he said quietly. "Marcus won't stop." Exposure was his opening move. "He'll push harder now." "I know," she replied. Her voice was tired but steady. "But I'm not afraid anymore." He turned to her, studying her profile, the strength woven into her softness. "Why not?" She lifted her eyes to his, and in them burned something brighter than fear. "Because I'm not alone." Owen's chest tightened, something long buried stirring alive. He pressed a kiss to her hair, closing his eyes. He let himself believe in something dangerous for the first time in years. Not control, not power, but hope. Morning light spilled across Chicago, like liquid gold painting the streets in deceptive warmth. Audrey Baker sat at the edge of her bed, clutching her phone as if it might bite. She hadn't slept. The storm from last night still thundered inside her chest, though the sky outside was clear. On the screen, her name blazed across headlines. Billionaire Owen Thomas, linked to young employee conflict of interest. Scandal unfolds. Who is Audrey Baker? Inside the mystery woman, capturing Chicago's Ice King, sleeping her way to the top. Corporate world, shaken by alleged affair. Each article cut sharper than the last pairing. Her photograph snapped in the cruel angles of paparazzi flashes, with words dipped in venom. Strangers dissected her life without permission, reducing her to caricature opportunist, mistress social climber. Her stomach twisted. This was the cost. This was the world Owen had tried to warn her about. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. She looked up. Owen stood at the door, a quiet storm in his own right. He wore no tie today, only a white shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked less like the untouchable titan and more like a bare man. "You've seen it," he said, not a question. She nodded all of it. His jaw tightened. "I can stop it." Her laugh was brittle. "Can you? Headlines don't disappear. People will believe what they want to believe." He crossed the room and crouched before her. His hands covered hers, grounding. "They can write what they want. What matters is the truth." "And what truth is that, Owen?" Her voice trembled. "That you and I are no one's spectacle," he said fiercely. "That you are not their narrative." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. "It doesn't feel like that. It feels like I'm drowning in someone else's version of me." He pressed his forehead against her knuckles, an intimate gesture unraveling her. "Then let me be the shore you cling to." The day did not relent. At the office, whispers grew teeth. Cameras lingered outside the building, feeding frenzy with every click. Audrey kept her head high, though the weight of invisible judgment pressed against her shoulders. Sandra passed her in the hall, lips pressed tight, eyes heavy with pity and distance. Richard offered a sly smirk, muttering, enjoying the upgrade. Loud enough to echo. Audrey ignored him. But Marcus was worse. He cornered her near the elevators, his smile sharp as glass. "Quite a spectacle you've made, Audrey. Headlines, photographs, all eyes on you." She bristled. "And who orchestrated it, Marcus?" He leaned closer, his voice a serpent's hiss. "You think Owen Thomas will protect you? Men like him don't bleed for women like you. You're temporary, disposable. You'll be left with nothing but scandal when he tires of you." Her pulse hammered, but she refused to show it. "Then why are you so desperate to convince me?" His smile faltered, then returned sharper. "Because you're a pawn in a game too large for you. Pawns are crushed without thought." The elevator dinged. She stepped inside, spine straight, refusing to grant him the last word. Yet his threat lingered, coiling tight inside her chest. That evening, Owen took her to the edge of the city, to a secluded townhouse, far from the eyes and ears of paparazzi. The place was quiet, warm, filled with polished wood and understated luxury. "You can stay here," he said softly. "It's safer. Fewer cameras, fewer threats." She wandered through the rooms, her fingertips brushing over shelves of books, photographs in muted frames. This wasn't his usual world of sharp edges and steel towers. This was something softer, something private. "Is this yours?" she asked. He nodded. "It was my mother's. I kept it. For peace, when I needed it." Audrey turned to him, her chest tightening. She saw a rare fracture in his eyes. The boy he had once been, the man who still sought refuge. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's yours," he replied without hesitation. Her breath caught. "Owen, I can't stop the world from clawing at you," he said, his voice raw. "But I can give you walls that keep it out." Her heart swelled and ached all at once. She wanted to protest and insist she didn't need saving, but she wanted this. Not protection, but partnership. She stepped closer, her hand grazing his. "I don't want walls between us, not anymore." His gaze darkened, conflict flickering, but then resolve settled. He pulled her gently into his arms, her head resting against his chest, his breath warm against her hair. For the first time that day, the noise of the world dimmed. The weeks spiraled. Articles multiplied, each one twisting the truth further. A photograph of Audrey leaving Owen's car became proof of an affair. An anonymous source painted her as ambitious and manipulative. Online forums dissected her looks, her background, her worth. At night, she sat in the townhouse's quiet, scrolling until her eyes blurred, punishing herself with every word. One night, Owen caught her. He plucked the phone from her trembling hands and set it aside. "Stop. I can't," she whispered. "They're defining me. I need to know what they're saying. They're liars." "But people believe liars," she said, voice cracking. "And what if I start to believe them too?" His hands cupped her face firm, commanding. "Then believe me instead." Her tears fell freely, but his thumbs brushed them away. "Audrey Baker," he murmured, voice steady as stone. "You are not a scandal. You are not disposable. You are the only thing that has felt real to me in years. If the world disagrees, then let the world burn." Her breath hitched, the sheer force of his conviction breaking through her despair. She pressed her forehead to his, clinging to his certainty. And at that moment, she chose not to drown in strangers' words, but to anchor herself in his. Still, Marcus lurked. His emails to the board grew sharper, his accusations more pointed. He leaked another photograph, this one of Audrey entering Owen's penthouse, the image shadowed, suggestive. The board called a private meeting. Owen invited Audrey to join. She hesitated. "They don't want me there." "They'll see you there," he countered. "Not as a weakness, as a truth." The meeting was cold, sterile, filled with sharp questions. Did Owen misuse influence? Was Audrey benefiting unfairly? Could contracts be compromised? Audrey sat silent, at first, hands trembling beneath the table. But then she lifted her chin. She said, "I did not ask for this." Her voice steady despite the tremor inside. "I did not seek it, but I will not apologize for it. My work stands on its own. My name does not belong to rumor. And if my presence here is a threat, it is only because some men fear what they cannot control." The room stilled. Owen looked at her with something close to awe. The board had no choice but to adjourn without a verdict, their unity fractured. Marcus stormed out, rage simmering. Outside the room, Owen touched her arm gently. "You were extraordinary." Her lips curved faintly. "No, just tired of being silent." That night, their silence was not heavy, but charged, fragile with possibility. They sat by the townhouse fireplace, the glow soft against their faces. Audrey leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her, drawing her close. For once, there was no strategy, no defense. Only the steady rhythm of breath, the unspoken truth of two souls weathering the same storm. "Owen," she whispered, almost afraid to break the quiet. "What happens if it doesn't stop?" His lips brushed her temple, tender, aching. "Then we face it, together." And for the first time, she believed they could. The townhouse had become a fragile cocoon, quiet, secluded, lined with the gentle hum of an almost merciful world. But peace, Audrey was learning, never lasted long when vultures circled. It began with a phone call. She was alone that morning, standing by the kitchen counter with a mug of untouched coffee, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Something in her gut told her to answer. "Ms. Baker," a voicemail sharp. "Do you care to comment on the records we've uncovered? Arrest reports, 2017. Charges for trespassing and resisting arrest. A night in county jail. Were you aware that your employer knows?" Her blood iced. What are you talking about?" the caller pressed. "We'll be running the story within the hour. Would you like to give your side before the world reads it?" The line clicked dead. Audrey's hand trembled so violently that the mug slipped shattering against the tile. Coffee spread like a stain, dark and accusing. When Owen returned that afternoon, her chest was still tight with dread. He found her sitting rigid on the sofa, eyes blank, the shards swept but not forgotten. "They know," she whispered. He knelt before her. "Who knows?" "Everyone," she said, voice brittle. "About that night. About the arrest." A long silence stretched. She couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. "It was one mistake," she said finally. "A protest. College friends. We were young, angry, shouting at the wrong doors. Police came. I panicked and ran. They dragged me in one night in jail. My record cleared, charges dropped. But now it's everywhere." Her voice cracked. "And Marcus will paint it as proof that I'm reckless, untrustworthy, tainted." Owen's hand found hers, steady, grounding. "Marcus doesn't get to define you. Not with lies, not with truths, twisted to knives." She shook her head, tears brimming. "But Owen, what if the board believes it? What if you—" His fingers lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. His gaze was unflinching. "I don't care if you burned cities down, Audrey. I care that you stand here now with me, stronger than anyone who has tried to break you." Her breath caught, chest tightening with something raw. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her as though her scars were crowns. But Marcus was relentless. By evening, articles had surfaced Audrey Baker's criminal past, the untold story. From protester to paramour, who was Owen Thomas's companion. Online voices were merciless, opportunist, criminal, gold digger. Audrey closed the laptop, bile rising. "It's not just my reputation," she whispered. "It's yours. They'll call you careless, accuse you of blindness." Owen's jaw hardened. "Let them." "No," she said sharply. "You've built everything. Your company, your name on precision control. I won't be the one to dismantle it." He stepped closer, his presence a tide pulling her in. "You think my empire is fragile enough to crumble at gossip?" His voice was low, fierce. "Audrey, if I lose it all, but keep you, I win." Her heart stuttered. His words were not a strategy. They were a vow. That night, the storm outside returned, rain lashing against the townhouse windows. Audrey sat curled beneath a blanket, staring into the fire's glow. Owen stood nearby, silent, watching her with a gaze that seemed to carry the weight of years. Finally, he spoke. "You should know something. If Marcus wants weapons, he won't have to dig far. My past is filled with them." She looked up. His tone was unlike she'd ever heard, stripped, almost fragile. "When my father died," he said, voice steady but low, "the company was chaos. I was 21, barely out of college, and suddenly, the heir. The board saw a boy with too much power. They were right. I made mistakes. Deals rushed, bridges burned. I lashed out cold, ruthless. I told myself control was strength, but really, it was fear." He turned, facing the rain beyond the glass. "I ruined people, Audrey. Not criminals, not enemies, people who trusted me. I leveraged debts, dismantled livelihoods. And for years I told myself it was survival. But it was cruel, my cruelty." Her chest tightened. This was not the Owen Thomas the world worshipped or feared. This was the man beneath the boy, still carrying the bones of his father's empire, still haunted by the ghosts he created. He faced her again, his eyes shadowed. "So if Marcus wants blood, he can have mine. But he won't have yours." Audrey rose, crossing the space between them. She laid her hand against his chest, feeling the steady thud beneath. "You carry guilt as if it defines you. But Owen, it doesn't. What defines you is this." Her fingers pressed firmer. "The man standing here. The man who shields me, who refuses to let me drown." For a moment, the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm between them. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was not desperate but reverent, as though she were the only truth in a world of lies. Days blurred into nights. Marcus pushed harder, leaks, whispers, threats veiled as professionalism. Yet within the townhouse, something unexpected blossomed. Intimacy is not of scandal, but of quiet. Audrey cooks in the small kitchen, and Owen watches with a faint, rare smile. Late evenings spent sprawled across the sofa, books half open, her head resting against his shoulder, the simple music of ordinary life, fragile but luminous. One night, as she folded laundry in the dim glow of a lamp, she laughed softly at herself. Who would have thought the girl branded a scandal folding a billionaire's shirts? Owen's voice was warm behind her. Who would have thought the billionaire would treasure her laughter more than his fortune? She turned, caught in his gaze, her heart spilling over. But reality intruded. An invitation arrived, no a summons. The board demanded Owen's presence at a shareholder meeting, and whispers said Marcus would be presenting evidence too damning to ignore. "Don't come," Owen told Audrey firmly. "This one is mine." She shook her head. "You don't get to fight this war alone. Not when I'm the weapon he's using." His eyes softened, but his voice remained steel. "You are not a weapon. You are the reason I fight at all." Still, she refused to yield. "Then let me stand beside you." For a long moment, silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled, surrendering. "Beside me, then." The meeting hall was cavernous, humming with tension. Shareholders filled the rows, murmurs buzzing like hornets. Marcus stood at the front, polished and hungry, his smile dripping triumph. He spoke of integrity, of corporate ethics, of betrayal. He displayed slides, Audrey's photographs, Audrey's past, even snippets of online ridicule. Each word, each image is a blade designed to cut. And yet, as the room stirred with whispers, Owen rose. His presence was silenced like a hammer on glass. "You call this evidence," he said coldly, "but it is nothing more than invasion and slander. Ms. Baker's past is her own, which does not diminish her brilliance, integrity, or worth. if you cannot see that the blindness is yours. He turned then and reached for her hand for the first time. Before the entire hall, he intertwined their fingers, lifting them, as though presenting truth itself. "This is not a scandal," he declared. "This is a strength, and if my company must fracture because I refuse to sever myself from what is real, let it fracture. I will build again with her." The hall erupted, gasps, protests, applause tangled together. Marcus's face burned scarlet, his victory crumbling beneath Owen's audacity. Audrey's hand trembled in his, but her heart soared. He had not just defended her, he had chosen her openly, irrevocably. That night back in the townhouse, silence stretched between them again. But it was different now. No longer heavy with fear, but brimming with everything unsaid. Audrey touched his cheek, her voice a whisper. "Do you know what you've done?" He met her gaze. "Yes. You've set fire to everything." His lips curved faintly. "Then let's burn Audrey. Together." And when they kissed, it was not the tentative brush of earlier nights, nor the desperate clash of storms. It was surrender, deep, consuming, inevitable. The kind of kiss that did not ask for permission, but promised forever. The storm had burned itself out. Chicago woke the next morning under skies scrubbed clean light, breaking over the city like absolution. Yet inside the townhouse, Audrey felt the tremor of something unfinished. Last night's shareholder meeting had changed everything. Owen had stood beside her before the world, defiant and unyielding. But Marcus was not a man who surrendered with silence. He would strike again and harder. She found Owen in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, coffee brewing. He looked impossibly calm for a man who had declared war on his board. "You should be resting," she murmured. "I don't rest when the battlefield is still smoking," he replied. His eyes lifted to hers, steady. "He'll come again." "Yes," she swallowed. "And what then?" He crossed the space, cupping her cheek, thumb brushing along her skin with devastating tenderness. "Then we fight together. No shadows, no walls. Whatever comes, we don't run." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Audrey believed him. The attack came swiftly. By afternoon, Marcus's final card hit the press confidential company documents, twisted to suggest fraud, mismanagement, reckless spending, all tied back to Owen. It was a coup wrapped in scandal, designed to shatter everything he had built. Board members called for his resignation. Headlines screamed betrayal, arrogance, downfall. But this time, something had shifted. Instead of silence or retreat, Owen went live. Not with a press team, not with carefully scripted lines, but with Audrey at his side. A simple feed streamed to millions. He stood before the camera, unflinching. "You want the truth? Here it is." Marcus Whitmore forged these numbers. He planted lies to save his ambition. I have evidence, and it will stand in court. But beyond that, you should know why I no longer care about his games. His hand found Audrey's, entwining their fingers. He looked into the lens as though into the eyes of the world. "Because this woman is not my weakness. She is my strength. You can strip away titles, money, and power. But if I walk out of this, with her hand in mine, I am the wealthiest man alive." The world gasped. Social media lit like wildfire. Some scoffed, some mocked, but many believed. Many saw not a scandal, but a conviction. And Marcus, furious, cornered and lashed out with threats of lawsuits. But within days the evidence turned. His manipulations surfaced, his leaks traced. He was expelled from the board in disgrace, his empire crumbling, while Owen's reputation, though bruised, began to rebuild. For Audrey, the battle was different. On the streets, whispers lingered. In comments, strangers still hurled venom. Yet when she walked beside Owen, Her head lifted, her hand clasped in his. She felt untouchable. He had chosen her not because the world had forgiven her, but because she had chosen herself. One evening, when the city hummed quietly beyond the townhouse windows, Owen drew her close by the fire. His voice was low, unguarded. "Do you know what I feared most, Audrey? It wasn't Marcus, or the board, or losing everything I've built." She looked up, breath held. "What then?" "Losing you." His confession fell like a stone in still water, rippling deep. "Because without you, the empire means nothing. Without you, I am only a man with empty hands." Her throat tightened, heart aching with fierce tenderness. She brushed her lips against his, whispering, "You'll never lose me. Not now, not ever." Their kiss deepened, not desperate but certain, a vow sealed in quiet firelight. Weeks later, life found a new rhythm. The scandal cooled. Marcus's shadow faded, and Owen's company, though scarred, stood resilient. But the life they began weaving together was more important than business or headlines. Not in towers of glass or boardrooms filled with steel-eyed men, but in small, ordinary moments. Cooking together, laughter spilling over burnt toast. She walked along the lake, wind tangling her hair, while his hand anchored hers, nights spent in whispered confessions, where love became less a battle and more a home. For the first time in years, Owen Thomas smiled, not because victory demanded it, but because love allowed it. And Audrey Baker, once painted as a scandal, discovered she was not a pawn, but a queen. Her voice carrying power, no whisper could diminish. Together, they were no longer hiding. Together, they were unbroken. And perhaps that is where the most authentic stories end, not with perfection, not with the silence of happily ever after, but with two people choosing each other again and again, despite storms, despite scars, despite the world's insistence that they shouldn't. Audrey and Owen faced the fire and emerged not untouched, but transformed. Stronger, wilder, irrevocably theirs. And as the city stretched before them, bright and alive, she leaned into him with a soft but confident smile. "We made it." His arm tightened around her, his whisper brushing against her ear. "No, Audrey, we're only beginning. And if their journey has touched you, if Owen and Audrey's love pulled at your heart the way it did mine, don't let the story end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you fight for love like they did? Tap like if their courage made you believe in something more profound. And follow the channel, because more stories await you, just as raw, sweeping, and unforgettable. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is keep choosing love, again and again.